On today's show, the Nets destroy the Wizards during Sunday's Tank Fest for their second win of the season, and Michael Porter Jr. leads the way. I'll outline my top takeaways from the game right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping the Nets' 129-106 win over the Washington Wizards. I'll dive into several high-level performances from Nets veterans, Jordi Fernandez's rotation decisions involving some of the rookies, the NBA's tank landscape, and more. But this was a game that a lot of Nets fans had circled on their calendars because it was the meeting of the Tank Titans, two of the NBA's worst team, the Nets and the Wizards, both with one win and double-digit losses entering this one. And the Nets really outclassed the Wizards for the overwhelming majority of this game. They were tied at the end of the first quarter, but from that point on, the Nets looked like the better team by far. And I'm going to get into that. There was a lot of fans, watching this game, Nets fans, that were probably rooting for the Nets to lose. There were a lot that were probably rooting for the Nets to win, but this is a game that I think does say some things about how the Nets are approaching the early season going in regard to the tank race, development, all of those things. And also, this says something about the Wizards. I'll get into them in a little bit. But before all of that, I want to talk about the high-level performances that we saw from several Nets players during this game and why the Nets were able to thoroughly outclass the Wizards in this one. And the biggest factor in this was Michael Porter Jr., who was playing some really high-level basketball of late. And today, he put on his best performance of the season, 34 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 11 of 18 from the field. And this comes one game after Porter Jr. nearly led the Nets to a win against the Magic on Friday in Orlando. He had probably one of the best quarters of his career in the first quarter. That once he's tied his career high for assists with 6 during the first quarter alone of that Magic win. He was playing really high-level ball, and then he fizzled out down the stretch, as did the rest of the Nets, and they were not able to come away with this win. But tonight, this was really just a lot of the good aspects of Michael Porter Jr.'s game. A lot of the way that you say if the Nets can get MPJ to buy into playing efficiently and in a way that optimizes his skill set, I think tonight was a really good example of that. And we're seeing slowly but surely Michael Porter Jr. starting to buy into it a little bit more because we know the criticisms of MPJ's game coming into this. It's obviously some shot chucking, some inefficient shot selection, a lot of shots that frankly look unserious a lot of the time. And then obviously the defense, the defensive engagement, the focus, all of that. And I think in this game, you saw Michael Porter Jr. really buying into a lot of things that Jordi Fernandez has been preaching because we talked about it. Entering the season, there was an expectation with MPJ stepping out of the shadows of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and into this Nets team that has really no other high-level shot creators, especially with Cam Thomas sideline. Like, this is MPJ's time. He's going to get to cook. He's going to be doing more on ball, ISO, high pick and roll, all that. And Jordi kind of tried to shut that down in training camp, said, I'm not going to have MPJ dribbling a lot. That's not what I view him to be really efficient at. I view him as a high-level floor spacer and a really good high-level cutter, a big target that the Nets can find on cuts and we can work off off-ball actions and be really efficient in that way. And that's what we saw in this one. I mean, MPJ, he was 3 of 8 from 3 in this one, so only 9 of his 34 points came from beyond the three-point line. A lot of it, the majority of it, was off-ball cutting and off-ball movement and off-ball actions and a really good understanding of how to position himself advantageously within these sets because obviously MPJ has a ton of gravity as a shooter. People are worried about, the Nets run all of these pin down sets, all these zoom actions, all these different things to get him coming off and, curling into these 3-point shots. But off that, a lot of teams are top blocking it and playing it on the top side. There's a lot of opportunity for backdoor cuts. There's a lot of opportunity for high-low actions, and we're seeing MPJ do that at a really high level in these last few games, in addition to the 3-point shooting, the curls, all of those things. So all of that is really positive. And you heard Jordi Fernandez after the game talk about it. Lack of dribbles. He said, I think MPJ is being really efficient with his dribbles. It's like when he's at his best, MPJ, it's 1, 2, maximum 3 dribbles into a shot. And then it's a lot of off-ball movement. And we're seeing that. And we're also seeing MPJ take a playmaking leap in this one. I mean, he had 7 assists in that Magic game. That was his career high. And then follows it up with 7 assists in this one. So he is getting into some, he's getting into a flow in terms of the playmaking. And I think that that's really positive. And then you look at what I said in terms of the off-ball movement and the efficiency and trying to kind of cut out some of the really, frankly, unserious shots that he takes sometimes. When he does that and when he commits to playing the way that Jordi Fernandez wants him to, I think you're seeing a really efficient mold that he can fit into. And you're seeing that those last couple games. Now, the defense, I've talked about it. Like, I think it was better these last 2 games, but it's still not good. Like, it still needs to improve. He just hasn't really looked engaged on that end too much. I think it's trending in the right direction, but still not that great. But overall, like, you look at MPJ, and I think that we've seen it. Like, that MPJ can be a winning player. He's a guy who was a starter, a high-level starter on a championship team. So you can do it with him. But I think you're seeing with this Nets team the last few games that he can fit into a role where he is really efficient and he can do things more seriously than maybe some people like tend to think of him and how he's been approaching this season. These last few games, I think, really positive for Michael Porter Jr. You look at the season now, he's at 24 points, 8 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 2.3 turnovers, 47, 35, 85 splits. So while there are, I think, some unserious moments with MPJ that will make you laugh out loud, like I laugh sometimes when I see some of the shots that he takes, but in these last few games, I think he's buying into playing in a little bit more of a serious and efficient way. And with that, you saw the Nets compete in that Magic game, and you saw them blow the doors off of this Wizards team with him leading the way. So positive stuff from MPJ, a player that, there's obviously questions about whether he can be a long-term piece with the Nets, but there's going to be a lot of conversation about what his trade value is. And I think that he's showing outside of the Nikola Jokic situation, where obviously everybody talks about the Jokic bump, he can still do these things and be a really efficient, impactful player on a team where he doesn't have that type of player leading the way. So that's a positive. And then talking about some of the other Nets performances, I mean, Nic Claxton continues to play some of the best offensive basketball of his career. You look at this tonight, 17 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 turnovers, 5 of 7 from the field, and 7 of 9 from 3. And Claxton has just continued to look extremely comfortable, extremely efficient, and extremely impactful in this Jordi Fernandez system, kind of playing as that hub big man, because we've talked about the playmaking jump that Claxton's made. I did an episode about it with Lucas Kaplan recently, but you look at the numbers now. I mean, he's at career low turnover percentage by far, despite posting career high usage. So he's been asked to do a lot more in this Jordi Fernandez system, and he's doing it at a really high level. I mean, he's near 20% assist percentage this season. That's the 7th highest among all centers, and he's doing that while taking care of the ball at a really high level. He's near a 3 assist to turnover ratio, which is outstanding. That's the 3rd highest among all centers that are playing over 10 minutes per game this season. So he's up there with Jokic and with some of these other guys. I mean, he's obviously not a playmaker at the level of Jokic, but in terms of taking care of the ball and posting assists, he's been up there right now. And then also the finishing, he's, shooting 72% at the rim. He's career high, shooting a career high percentage on short mid-range shots, which is 4 to 14 feet. And then the defense, which is obviously, looked a little bit lacking at some points. He blocked 4 shots tonight. He did a good job on the defensive glass. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the Wizards and how bad they are. But this was another extremely efficient Nic Claxton performance. And I think you saw a lot of good energy on the defensive end. So the arrow with Clax just continues to point up. There are defensive rebounding concerns, which I've talked about at length, that might limit his market somewhat. But if you're talking about the offensive end of the floor, the arrow is just continuously pointing up. And that is a major positive for a player who really struggled last season. Last guy I want to touch on is Tyrese Martin, who played extended minutes in this one. And he had probably his best performance of the season by far. 20 points, 4 assists, 8 of 12 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. Played the majority of the point guard minutes over Yegor Dioman, despite coming off the bench. And that is something that I am going to get to later in the show and how Jordi is approaching the rookie minutes. But Tyrese, a guy who's been up and down this season, but this was a performance that shows you that, he has some of these high-level performances in his bag, albeit against a very low-level team. But the Nets, like Tyrese, they really enjoyed, what he did last season and really have spoken. They've raved about what he did over the offseason, what he did during the summer, and he continues to get opportunities in this Nets offense. And this was a performance tonight where he really, backed up the faith that the Nets have shown in him. And he did really good things, as did Noah Clowney, another guy I want to briefly hit on. Struggled early in the game, came in the fourth quarter, hit 3 3-pointers to open the fourth quarter and really put this Nets game away. So just high-level contributions across the board from this Nets team, and it led to a blowout win, which you're not going to see many times during this season, over this Wizards team that is also firmly entrenched in the tank race, and that is a huge part of the conversation surrounding this game. So how does this win impact the tank race? How does Jordi's approach to the rotations, how is that impacting the tank race, and how will it down the season? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money, trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood's Legend Advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood Strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money too. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Guys, you can use Game Time to grab seats for any NBA game, and it couldn't be simpler. You'll have great seats in minutes. What you see is what you pay. There's no hidden fees at checkouts. Plus, you can see exactly what your seat looks like before you buy the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, recapping Brooklyn's blowout win over the Washington Wizards. And this game was the tank fest, the tank off, the tankapalooza, whatever you want to call it. This was the tank game to see who was going to move a game out or a game back in the draft lottery standings. And that was the Nets picking up this win. And I want to talk a little bit about the tank landscape, because I've talked to some Nets fans. I've been in Twitter spaces. I've taken Fan Take Friday questions. I've seen things on social media and other places. A lot of Nets comments on YouTube. A lot of Nets fans really concerned about the Nets tank, despite them being 1-11 entering this game, which I think speaks to some of the PTSD that Nets fans have from last season about, falling to the 6th worst record in the league and then falling to the 8th pick in the draft and missing out on some of these top guys in last year's class. Just an overarching fear of that happening again. And despite the Nets being 1-11 and them seemingly doing about as good a job tanking as you could expect them to, they beat this Wizards team. They fall a game back, and a lot of that conversation is going to continue. So I just want to talk about the tank landscape with this. The Nets are 2-11, and there are two teams that are ahead of them in the tank standings right now, the Wizards at 1-12 and the Pacers at 1-12. You look at the teams behind the Nets, you have the New Orleans Pelicans are 2-10. The Sacramento Kings are 3-11. The Dallas Mavericks 3-10. Utah Jazz 4-8. And if you're talking about the legit threats to the Nets in this tank right now, I think you look at, obviously, the Washington Wizards and the Indiana Pacers, because the Nets, I think, have done just about as good of a job as you can with this tank, as I said. But this is a pretty historic season in terms of how bad the teams are at the bottom of the standings. I mean, we have 3 teams who had 1 win and double-digit losses entering tonight. That's the first time I saw a stat in well over a decade that has happened. And you also have multiple teams behind them that can't enter the conversation. So while the Nets are extremely bad, without a doubt, one of the worst teams in the league and far worse than they were at this time last season, there are a lot of other teams that are really bad. So it's no guarantee that the Nets are going to be like the worst record in the league, or even the 2nd worst record in the league, or even the 3rd worst record in the league. I think that they have a really good shot, but there are going to be a lot of other teams that are going to enter that conversation. And legit threats, the Wizards and the Pacers, I think, are the first 2 teams you have to talk about, because the Wizards are frankly just atrocious. I mean, in this game, like, they looked awful. They played some decent games this season. They obviously have a win. They almost beat the Pistons. They choked that away. But other than that, they've been getting blown out. They have the worst net rating in the league before this game, even behind the Nets. And despite having all this young talent on the team, like you want to talk about guys like Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, Trey Johnson, obviously, whoever else you want to say, they're just a team that frankly looks, disjointed and discombobulated for the most of this game. And most games, they just don't look like they're playing at a high level at all. And while this Nets team is extremely bad, this is a team that I feel like you could say is a little bit better than the Wizards, and they confirmed that tonight. And I think that there's probably going to have to be some moves as the season progresses for the Nets to try to get, push themselves into that number one spot in terms of the draft lottery standings. The Pacers, another team that has a lot of talent, but a lot of those guys are hurt. And it's been pretty clear early this year, how much Tyrese Halliburton means to that team in terms of competing. So you have this Pacers team that is missing a lot of guys due to injury. And while I think a lot of them can come back, when they are back, it hasn't looked good anyway. And it's a team with Halliburton now that just doesn't have any incentive to try to really push for wins. I mean, they got their pick back. They traded back for it right at the end of the season last year during that playoff race, and they have it now. And you have Halliburton in this team and this really good nucleus of guys, and you have all of these guys coming in this draft class. They're at an extremely high level. They're a team that as the season progresses, you'll probably see them lean further and further into the tank. And with them already looking this bad early in the season, they're definitely a team alongside the Wizards that is a legit threat to finish ahead of the Nets in the draft lottery standings. If you want to talk about other teams that I wouldn't say are huge threats right now, but I think could certainly enter the conversation. I think you're looking at teams like the Utah Jazz, who are obviously, just usually one of the worst teams in the league. And I don't think they've done much to improve their roster. So they're 4-8 right now, but I could very much see them entering the conversation. And then you have other teams that are, we're trying to compete entering the year, but you could perceivably see them tearing it down. The Dallas Mavericks, with them firing Nico Harrison and with them going seemingly into another timeline. And, the logical move being to build around Cooper Flagg. They're 3-8, but another team that could very well enter the conversation. You trade Anthony Davis, you move off some other pieces, which frankly is what they should be doing. That's the smart move because they have their pick in this year, and then they don't have their pick for a bunch of years after that. They should be trying to tear this down, get whatever assets they can for the pieces they have that are win now pieces, and then try to get another high-level guy to pair with Cooper Flagg. So they're a threat. The Sacramento Kings, as I said, are 3-11, but they're a team that there's been some rumblings and reports over the last week that they could be trying to tear it down and go into a rebuild. So another team that could definitely enter the conversation. And, you talk to people around the league. I've talked to people early this season. I've talked to draft analysts. I've talked to front office people, scouts. The quality of the top of this coming year's draft is just the talk of the league right now, especially amongst teams that are in the bottom half of the standings. I mean, you have these three players in Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansta, Cam Boozer, who are regarded as extremely high-level players. I've heard a lot of draft people say that all three of those guys would be the number 2 pick in last year's draft. And a couple of them, Peterson especially, would have a chance to challenge Cooper Flagg for the number 1 pick. So that's an extremely high-level, top of the draft. And then you have guys like, Michael Brown, Nate Ament, Caleb Wilson. There's other guys who are high-quality prospects. So the overall quality of that draft and the strength and all the buzz that's being generated about it is only going to incentivize more teams to get into the tank. So if you're talking about a team like the Pacers, they're going to be incentivized. The Mavericks, the Kings, I think that's why you're hearing a lot of smoke about the rebuild. Even a team like the Celtics, I think that they're just too talented. I think they'll be ahead of the Nets, but just a lot of other teams that could enter the conversation. And that brings in an interesting conversation about Jordi Fernandez, because Jordi is coaching to win right now. Like, it's clear that he's coaching to win. That is a priority for him right now. He is doing things to try to put this Nets team in the best position to win these games. And I think that that's going to draw some frustrations among some Nets fans in a year that is really tanking. And, I think that you certainly, I understand why he's doing that early in the season, because as I said, he's trying to put his best foot forward and send a message to the veterans and the other guys in the locker room that he is trying to do these things just to try to keep some semblance of buy-in and not let this just completely spiral out of control. Because while that is positive in terms of draft position, it also has negatives for the rookies and other guys, and in terms of just how toxic a situation can get. So I understand why Jordy's doing that, but at a certain point, it's going to need to shift more towards a tanking priority, more towards development of the rookies in turn with that priority. And all of that is, kind of evident by how bad the lottery standings, by how bad teams are at the bottom of the standings. And there's going to be a lot of competition for those picks. And, a lot of people are going to make the argument that, it's a lottery. The Mavericks had whatever percent chance and they jumped up to the number one pick. And that is true. Like, there's a lot more parity in terms of the way that they've structured the lottery odds, but it's not just about getting the number one pick. It's mostly also about the floor of your pick, because this is a draft where I said 3 really high level guys, but there's a few other guys who are moving into the pack in those 4, 5, 6 spots. So if you're the worst record in the league, the worst your pick can be is 5, 2nd, 6th, 3rd, 7th. And we saw that with the Nets last year. They fell to the 8th pick. You want to really avoid that. And you want to put yourself firmly in like that top 5, 6 conversation. And to do that, you have to be in, the top couple of spots of the draft lottery standings, which means the worst couple of records in the league. And there's going to be competition for those spots. And as the season progresses, I think you're going to have to see Jordi Fernandez shift a little bit towards prioritizing that. And that's really actually a Sean Marks decision, a Joe Tsai decision. They're going to be the guys who are dictating a lot of this. So you're going to need to see a little bit more pressure put on Jordi by those guys, is the way that I would word it, in order to try to finish towards the top of the draft lottery standings. And what is that going to look like? That's going to look like a lot more priority of development of the rookies, of the young guys, and less leaning into these veterans. And that's something that we haven't seen from Jordi thus far, and that's something that is ruffling some of the feathers of Nets fans. So how is Jordi approaching the rookies that are in the rotation right now, and what do fans have to say about that? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about a Nets blowout win over the Washington Wizards, and closing it with how is Jordi Fernandez approaching rookie development? And this has been a hot conversation early in the season, with the Nets having 5 first-round picks, an NBA record, and only 2 of them being in the rotation right now. And even those 2 taking a back seat to a lot of veterans. That was the case in Friday's Magic loss. We saw Yegor Joman benched for large stretches of the second half, and Jordi Fernandez opted to close with Tyrese Martin over Yegor Joman in that game, despite neither of them really playing well. Yegor did some good things, but neither of them had high-level games during that one. And you look tonight, Yegor Joman and Drake Powell continue to take a back seat to veterans like Tyrese Martin and like Zaire Williams. You look at Yegor and Drake tonight, they played 20 minutes each. You look at Tyrese Martin, he played 26 minutes. Zaire Williams played 30 minutes. And you look at the last 8 games since Ben Surratt went down, because Ben Surratt started the first 5 games at point guard, but after that, he was removed from the rotation. And it has been Yegor Joman and Tyrese Martin really have been the point guard options. Also, Terrence Mann, you can throw into that conversation. But since then, it's been pretty even between Yegor and Joman, but Tyrese has had a slight edge. Over those last 8 games since Surratt was out of the rotation, Yegor is at 20.6 minutes per game, and Tyrese Martin is at 22.7 minutes per game. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that Jordi feels that Tyrese gives this team a better chance to win and a better chance to compete right now. And that's probably true. Like, do I think there's a massive gap between Yegor and Tyrese right now? No, but I would say that Yegor is not as, not at the level of ball handler, the level of shooter or shot creator that Tyrese Martin is, because he's 19 years old and he's a rookie, and Tyrese Martin is 26 right now and has been showing improved abilities to do some of those things. So Tyrese has been Jordi's kind of comfort zone, his guy. We saw that when Ben Surratt went out of the rotation. He made Tyrese Martin the starter. Then they had one game where Terrence Mann was starting, and then he put Yegor into the starting lineup. But despite that, Tyrese has been the guy. When it's a close game, when there's someone to close with, he's been going with him. And he's been playing more minutes than Yegor, despite coming off the bench. And you could say the same thing about Drake Powell. Drake Powell's been turning in some pretty high-level performances, but despite that, his minutes have remained limited. I mean, you look at the last 5 games, that's since Powell came back from that ankle injury and has been in the lineup. Drake is playing 22.6 minutes per game, and Zaire Williams has been playing 25.6 minutes, and he's also like that other wing that's coming off the bench in competition with Powell for minutes. So the arrow in both of these conversations, in the Yegor point guard conversation, in the Drake wing conversation, is pointing towards the veterans in Tyrese Martin and Zaire Williams. And that is because, as I said before, Jordi is trying to win games, and he feels that Tyrese and Zaire give this team a better chance to win games right now, which in the Yegor conversation, I think Tyrese does give the Nets a better chance. And the other conversation, I think Zaire does also. He's much more experienced and is more polished overall as a player. This is his 5th year in the league, but Drake is playing some really high-level basketball. And there have been points where I feel like in these last few games that Drake is cooking a little bit. He's doing some really good things on both ends, and you could be giving him more minutes. I don't know how much of that is Drake coming off the knee injury this offseason, also him having the couple of ankle injuries. We know that the Nets are very cautious with the ramp-up, but I do think that there is room for Drake to get more minutes, as there is Yegor. But right now, Jordi is trying to compete, and he's going with those veterans. And I think it all even goes past that, because Jordi has almost had like a catchphrase or a slogan that he's used when talking about this. And he said, "Nothing is given." That's the term that he continually used. And I feel like he's kind of trying to send a message, not just to the rookies, but also to the rest of the locker room that, as I said before, he's putting his best foot forward, and whoever plays the best, he's going to give those guys opportunities. And I said about a guy like Tyrese Martin before, the Nets really like what Tyrese did this offseason. They really like what he did last season. Everything that the Nets have asked of Tyrese, he's done. And Jordi has just raved about him, the buy-in, the example he sets, all of those things that he does. So they're trying to reward a player who's done all of that thing. So I think that that is part of it, sending a message to the veterans in the group that if you do these things, you're going to be rewarded, that they're trying to put their best foot forward to win and trying to keep the rest of the team bought in. I do think there's also a part of this that Jordi's trying to keep these rookies and these young guys hungry, like that nothing is given message. I think that that is part of it. Like, you're trying to keep these guys hungry. You're hoping that they don't get complacent. And by maybe leaning towards some of these veterans, you do all of that. You also, as I said, send the message to the rest of the locker room that you're trying to win. But at the end of the day, everybody knows what this season is about. Fans, coaches, front office, players, everybody knows what it's about. It's about tanking, frankly, and it's about rookie development and all of those things. So while, Jordi is trying to do all these things, he's trying to reward players who have done the right things. He's trying to send the message to the rest of the locker room. This is about rookie development. And you look at like Yegor throughout this season, through 12 games, he's playing 21 minutes per game. That's 12th among all rookies. And like, is that the end of the world, Yegor playing 21 minutes a game, being 12th among the rookies? No. Like, he's still getting his minutes. He's still getting opportunities to develop, but he's 12th, and he's on a team that's supposed to be tanking harder than anybody in the league. So you would like to see him higher in the minutes and up towards the top of the rookies, especially given it's a developmental prospect. This is a season that is about tanking and about rookie development. And I've said that we're very early right now. Like, it's 1-11. I think Jordi is trying to do things to keep this from spiraling and getting a second win through 13 games. It's not the end of the world. Playing some of these veterans a few more minutes than some of the rookies, it's not the end of the world. But if this continues and we're still talking about this way in, February, March, April, that would be very concerning. And that's when I think fans would have a major right to get really upset. So I think that there are some quips that fans could have and some, issue that they could take with some of the way that the Nets are approaching this early on. I say we're 13 games in. The Nets are 2-11. And as the year progresses, I think it will pretty clearly shift more towards rookie development and more towards a tanking agenda. And if that's not the case, fans will have every right to be mad. And I'll have a lot of podcasts where I'm talking about why I think those are the wrong decisions if it plays out that way. But that's all I got for today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about this win. Hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy this, take a second, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. The Nets are returning to Barclays Center to take on the Boston Celtics on Tuesday. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.